Melania Trump stepped into the spotlight at a glamorous gala, but what she did next shocked everyone and left her critics speechless. Ready for the bold move that turned heads and silenced the haters? Let's find out. The gala was the event of the year, a lavish affair held in a grand ballroom where the spotlight shone on the biggest names in entertainment, politics, and business. But amid the glitz and glamour, one person's arrival captured more attention than anyone else. Melania Trump. The air was thick with anticipation. All eyes were on her, waiting to see if she would deliver another flawless appearance or, perhaps, falter in front of the crowd. She had been the subject of criticism for years, with her every move analyzed, scrutinized, and torn apart by the media and the public alike. And now, the moment had come. But Melania Trump wasn't there to simply attend another event. She was there to remind the world that she was in control. The whispers about her fashion, her demeanor, and her every action were already swirling in the background. And yet, she was about to make a move that would shut them all down. This wasn't just a night of glam and glitter. It was a night where Melania would defy the odds and shut down the critics, all without ever raising her voice. The move she was about to make would leave the crowd stunned and the media scrambling. But more importantly, it would show the world exactly who Melania Trump truly was, a woman who could turn even the most intense spotlight into her moment of power. The game was about to change, and Melania was ready to play. As the evening unfolded, the gala became an exclusive showcase of the world's elite. The event, held at one of the city's most prestigious venues, attracted the most influential figures, business tycoons, A-list celebrities, and dignitaries. The crystal chandeliers overhead gleamed like stars, casting a soft golden glow on the sea of glamorous gowns and sharply tailored suits. In such an environment, expectations were high, not just for the event itself, but for those attending. It was the kind of gathering where every detail mattered, from the way you walked into the room to how you interacted with those around you. This wasn't a casual affair. This was a spotlight moment for those who graced the venue. And for Melania Trump, this was no exception. As the wife of one of the most talked-about figures in the world, the expectations placed on her were monumental. The cameras were focused on her. The whispers and murmurs in the room were constant. She had to live up to her carefully curated image. Yet, there was always that underlying pressure to be more than just the perfectly poised woman by her husband's side. She was Melania Trump, a former supermodel, a first lady, and now a global icon in her own right. This wasn't just a gala, it was a moment for Melania to make a statement. As the crowd buzzed with chatter, waiting for the night's stars to shine, it became clear. Melania had a chance to either break free from the criticisms that often clouded her public persona or simply blend into the background, playing the role expected of her. But she had no intention of doing that. The glittering expectations that hung in the air weren't just a challenge, they were fuel for what was about to unfold. The crowd anticipated a powerful entrance, yes, but what they didn't know was that Melania was already preparing to blow away all expectations with a bold and unexpected move. She was about to prove that she was far more than what the media painted her to be, and that no one could control her narrative. Tonight, the stakes were high, but Melania was ready to elevate the game. As Melania Trump stepped into the spotlight, she was well aware of the constant scrutiny she faced from critics. It wasn't just her role as First Lady that made her a target, it was everything about her. From her immaculate fashion choices to her silence on key issues, Melania had been criticized relentlessly for not meeting the expectations set by the public and the media. Her critics had painted her as aloof, out of touch, and often, they argued, too passive in a world that demanded boldness from those in power. But it wasn't just the political sphere where she found herself under fire. Even her personal style became a point of contention. Whether it was a gown she wore to an event or the way she styled her hair, every aspect of her appearance was dissected and judged. And let's not forget the ridicule she faced for her choice of initiatives as First Lady, which were often dismissed by the public as lacking depth or substance. Despite her high-profile status, Melania had often been the subject of biting remarks, and the criticism didn't stop with her appearance. People mocked her lack of public speaking engagements, or her choice to stay out of the political spotlight. The media outlets seemed intent on defining her by her silence, portraying her as a figurehead rather than someone with real agency and vision. As the gala continued, these whispers of discontent and disdain could be felt in the air. She was surrounded by those who had publicly voiced their displeasure with her, from political pundits to fashion critics. These voices, sharp and vocal, weren't just attacking her personally, they were questioning her right to be at this elite event, and by extension, her place in the public eye. Yet, it wasn't just external criticism that plagued Melania. There were constant rumors and speculation about her relationship with her husband, Donald Trump. The media loved to paint a narrative of her as a figure trying to escape the shadows of his chaotic presidency. The tabloids, in particular, were relentless in creating stories of tension and discord between them, feeding into the notion that Melania was merely a passive observer in her own life, an accessory to her husband's public life. But as she walked through the ballroom, these incessant attacks weren't the only thing occupying her mind. In this moment, Melania felt something deeper, something more personal. The weight of an expectation that she couldn't just blend into the background. She had to show that she was more than what the critics had painted her to be. And unbeknownst to everyone in the room, she was about to take a step that would silence the critics and shake up everything they thought they knew about her. The evening had reached a critical point. The whispers and judgments surrounding Melania Trump were growing louder, but she was about to take an action that would command everyone's attention and turn the tide in her favor. It wasn't the typical way people would expect her to react. Melania was never one to rush into the spotlight, nor did she often make headlines for controversial statements or actions. But tonight, something was different. As the event proceeded, the hushed tones of her critics seemed to intensify. A certain level of discomfort in the air signaled that the moment had come for Melania to make her move. The attendees, many of whom had been waiting for her to falter, were all watching, eager to see if she would react or simply fade into the background. The media had their cameras poised, ready to capture the smallest gesture, the slightest mistake. Melania, however, was no stranger to the pressure of the public eye. She had lived with it for years, and it had only made her more determined, more deliberate in her approach to handling moments like these. Silently, she surveyed the room, acknowledging the presence of the critics, the onlookers, and the ever-present media cameras. But instead of feeling cornered or defeated, she felt a surge of confidence welling up inside her. Without warning, Melania walked toward the center of the room, past the tables of conversation and the curious eyes that followed her every move. Her posture was tall, shoulders squared. There was a certain grace in her movements, but it was the energy she radiated that made all the difference. In that moment, it was clear she was no longer the passive figure that so many had written her off as. She was in control, and she was ready to make her mark. The room went silent as she approached the stage. Every eye was on her, and the subtle shift in the energy around her became palpable. It was as if the entire event had paused, waiting for her next move. Melania stepped up to the microphone, where previously there had been political figures and socialites making speeches or exchanging pleasantries. But tonight, it was her turn. She began speaking, not with anger, not with defense, but with a calm authority that made everyone in the room lean in. Her words were carefully chosen, but they were powerful. She began by addressing the issues that had been hanging in the air, the criticisms, the judgments, the false narratives that had been fed to the public about her. But instead of lashing out or becoming defensive, Melania turned the conversation into something entirely different. She spoke of unity, of family, and of the need for compassion in the face of adversity. It was a message that resonated deeply, not just with the audience in the room, but with everyone watching from outside. She didn't need to be confrontational to shut down her critics. She simply needed to stand tall and speak from a place of inner strength and dignity. What made her move so bold, so impactful, was the fact that it wasn't just about silencing the critics. It was about changing the narrative entirely. Melania, in her poised manner, was reclaiming the spotlight on her own terms, showing the world that she was more than just a figure to be ridiculed or misunderstood. She was a force in her own right, and she was using her voice to remind everyone in the room and beyond that she had something valuable to contribute. As she spoke, the room, which had been previously filled with whispers of judgment, fell into a deafening silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. Quite the opposite. It was a silence that spoke volumes, one that reflected the power of her words and the way they had shifted the energy of the event. Melania wasn't just addressing her critics, she was addressing the world, showing them that she was not to be underestimated. By the time she finished her brief speech, the applause that followed was thunderous. People who had previously doubted her, criticized her, or even written her off as a passive figure were now giving her the recognition she deserved. The quiet murmur of approval was undeniable. What had started as a night filled with tension and doubt had turned into a moment of respect and admiration for Melania Trump. She had stepped into her power, and in doing so, had completely reshaped the narrative around her. The room was in a state of shock. Just moments ago, the air had been thick with whispers and judgment, but now, everything had shifted. The audience, initially skeptical and quick to criticize, had fallen into stunned silence as Melania Trump finished her impromptu speech. The elegant ballroom, once filled with the hum of hushed conversations, was now eerily still. Every eye was locked on her, some in admiration, some in disbelief. But there was no denying the fact that she had captured the attention of everyone present. The first reaction came from the front tables, where a group of high-profile guests sat. The powerful socialites and political figures, who had been anticipating a mistake or a slip-up, now looked at each other with a newfound respect. The expressions on their faces had changed from skepticism to awe. It wasn't just the grace of her delivery or the calmness in her voice that impressed them. It was the sheer confidence that Melania had displayed in the face of adversity. They had expected her to falter or shrink away, but instead, she had turned the tables with poise and conviction. A few guests at the far side of the room exchanged glances, perhaps surprised by the effectiveness of her speech. Those who had made quiet comments or exchanged dismissive looks earlier were now silent, their expressions betraying the respect they were begrudgingly giving her. Some even leaned forward in their chairs, absorbing the weight of what had just transpired. The most telling moment came when the camera flashes erupted. The media, which had been quietly covering the event, was now visibly agitated. Photographers, who had once seemed uninterested in capturing her image, were scrambling to get shots of Melania. Video cameras zoomed in, desperate to capture every angle of her newfound stance. The attention had shifted. No longer were they just covering her as a bystander to the event. Now she was the story, and the media was ready to follow her lead. But what about the room's more personal reactions? The waitstaff, who had been quietly attending to the guests throughout the evening, had been among the most affected. The sudden shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Many of them, who had previously seen Melania as another figure in the crowd, were now looking at her with a newfound admiration. It wasn't just her words, it was the act of standing up to her critics that spoke volumes. Her speech was a demonstration of courage and strength, qualities that were not lost on those who had been silently working behind the scenes. Among the guests who had been sitting in judgment, a sense of discomfort began to take hold. Some shifted uneasily in their seats, unsure of how to respond. Others began to look down at their laps or fidget with their drink glasses. The energy had undeniably changed, and it was as though the very essence of the room had been recalibrated. What had once been a place of tension had now become a space of reflection, where even the most critical attendees began to reconsider their initial assessments. In the back corner of the room, a few of Melania's staunch supporters, those who had always admired her for her composure and strength, couldn't help but smile. They exchanged knowing glances, proud of how she had handled the situation with such grace. For them, this moment was a long-awaited triumph, a testament to Melania's resilience in the face of adversity. As the last words of her speech hung in the air, the reactions of the room could no longer be ignored. It was clear that Melania had achieved something rare. She had silenced her critics, commanded respect, and captured the admiration of a room that had once doubted her. The applause that followed was not merely polite. It was genuine, resounding with appreciation for her courage and ability to stand firm when the world expected her to cower. In that moment, the room was no longer divided. There was an unspoken agreement among the guests that what had just happened was significant. Respect had been earned, not through aggression or retaliation, but through quiet strength and elegance. The audience was now fully aware of the woman who stood before them, not just as the First Lady, but as a force in her own right. The air had shifted once again, and this time it was filled with admiration. The immediate aftermath of Melania Trump's bold move at the gala sent shockwaves through the media landscape. Within moments of the speech, social media exploded with reactions, and journalists began scrambling to cover the unfolding story. What had initially been a relatively low-key event now turned into the headline of the day. Melania's critics, who had once dismissed her as a figurehead, suddenly had to reckon with her fierce, confident public stance. News outlets, both mainstream and independent, quickly picked up the story, with every channel broadcasting her words and the reactions from the gala. At first, many outlets were unsure how to spin the incident. Some tried to downplay her actions, calling it a simple display of emotional outbursts, while others, particularly more conservative outlets, hailed her speech as a triumph of grace under fire. The contrast in interpretations was sharp, with each side using her gesture to further its own narrative. But as the hours passed, the tone of the coverage began to shift. The narrative, once controlled by the harshest critics, was now dominated by the public's support for her actions. The polls started to reflect this change, with a significant portion of the population praising her poise and dignified response. The media couldn't ignore the impact it had on the audience, and as a result, several prominent media figures began to pivot, giving more credit to Melania for her ability to stand up to the criticism and command attention with a simple yet profound message. Some of the more liberal outlets, which had long criticized her silence or passivity in the past, began to shift their approach. They began to acknowledge that Melania's stance in the face of adversity was a powerful moment, though of course, they couldn't resist peppering their coverage with more pointed questions about her motivations and intent. The scrutiny, now with a slightly different undertone, focused on what exactly prompted this new public stance from the First Lady. Was it truly a spontaneous act, or was there a larger plan at work? These questions quickly made their way into panel discussions and analysis pieces. Meanwhile, social media influencers jumped into the fray, using the moment as fuel for viral campaigns. Memes, GIFs, and quick turnaround videos flooded platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Some praised Melania's unflinching confidence, while others dissected her every word and gesture, looking for hidden meanings or underlying tensions. Hashtags like #MelaniaSpeaks and Grace Under Pressure trended on Twitter, while others, less favorable, like Melania Forgets Her Roots and Token Speech, found their place as well. In the editorial world, many writers took to their keyboards to weigh in. Some reflected on her journey as First Lady, noting how she had often been in the background or sidelined in favor of more prominent political figures. In these editorials, a narrative began to emerge. This bold move wasn't just about silencing the critics at the gala. It was about Melania finding her voice in a more public, political context. These pieces speculated on what this could mean for her future endeavors, and whether this newfound confidence could translate into a more active role within the Trump administration. The media outlets that had initially dismissed her were now being forced to acknowledge her resilience. Television segments that had previously focused on trivial matters like her fashion choices or family life were suddenly dedicating whole segments to analyzing her speech. In interviews, political commentators debated the political implications of her actions, speculating whether her newfound visibility would influence her husband's public image or alter the way she was viewed in the context of her role as First Lady. Talk shows were abuzz with heated discussions. Late-night hosts, who had previously poked fun at Melania, now had to navigate the thin line between humor and respect. The tone of jokes shifted from derision to curiosity as they sought to understand the woman who had just made such a striking move. The comics on air now found themselves in the awkward position of having to find humor in a situation that seemed to have turned into an undeniable statement of power and resolve. But the media fallout wasn't just limited to journalists and celebrities. Public figures who had been harsh critics of the Trump family found themselves cornered. For many, it was difficult to respond in a way that didn't seem dismissive, especially as the general public seemed more sympathetic to Melania's actions. Suddenly, figures like journalists and politicians who had commented negatively on Melania were facing mounting pressure to either retract their statements or provide an explanation for their harsh rhetoric. The debate became polarized, and the fallout continued to reverberate across the political spectrum. Republican-leaning outlets saw the incident as a potential moment for political renewal, framing it as a moment of strength that could play into the broader narrative of a unified family that stood together against a critical world. Liberal-leaning media, on the other hand, questioned whether Melania's actions were part of a larger political strategy or whether she was truly stepping into her own spotlight for the first time. The social media response reached new heights. Viral videos showcasing clips from the gala, as well as those comparing her speech to other historical moments of public defiance, sparked even more debate. From casual observers to political analysts, everyone seemed to have an opinion about the First Lady's bold move. Memes, reaction videos, and quotes from her speech were shared widely, providing a platform for fans and detractors alike to voice their opinions. In the end, the media fallout was an unavoidable testament to the power of Melania Trump's move. What started as a public event turned into a cultural moment, one that would be discussed, analyzed, and debated for weeks to come. Whether they admired or criticized her, one thing was clear: Melania had made her mark. The long-term impact of Melania Trump's bold move at the gala transcended the immediate media frenzy. What initially appeared to be a single moment of defiance evolved into a defining chapter of her public persona. In the months and years that followed, Melania's reputation underwent a significant shift. The public and media began to view her less as a passive figure and more as someone who could shape and influence the national conversation on her own terms. Her act of standing up to the critics sent a clear message that she was not just the First Lady by title, but a woman with her own voice and a willingness to assert herself. This empowerment became a cornerstone of her image, influencing her future decisions and public appearances. For many, her stance at the gala was a turning point, showcasing her ability to navigate a male-dominated political and social arena. Moreover, the support she received from segments of the public and even her family resonated with those who had long admired her quiet strength. This act of courage laid the foundation for her to take on more visible and significant roles in both charity work and public initiatives. Her presence at events became more impactful, often sparking discussions not only about the issues at hand, but about her personal growth and transformation into a more outspoken, confident individual. In the broader scope of politics, Melania's evolution was seen as a reflection of the changing dynamics within the Trump family. As Donald Trump's political career continued to evolve, many started to question whether Melania's rising profile would shape his legacy. Her newfound visibility sparked curiosity about her future ambitions and whether she would seek more influence in the political sphere. Ultimately, Melania's bold move left an enduring legacy, influencing how First Ladies would be viewed moving forward. The expectations of passivity were broken, paving the way for future figures in the role to step out from the shadows and carve their own paths. Her bold stance wasn't just a moment of defiance, it became a symbol of empowerment for women everywhere, sending a message that they could stand up and make their voices heard in the face of adversity. Melania Trump's bold move at the gala was far more than just a reaction to criticism. It was a defining moment that reshaped her public image and left an indelible mark on the perception of First Ladies. Her refusal to bow to the haters demonstrated strength, confidence, and a commitment to standing her ground. This pivotal moment not only elevated her public persona, but also inspired others to speak out against injustice and challenge societal expectations. As time passed, Melania's actions proved that sometimes a single bold act can change the course of a narrative, leaving a lasting impact on both the individual and the broader cultural landscape.